I'm Clara, 42, female, and I discovered my husband's entire career was a lie, a realization that unraveled our 15-year marriage. For 15 years, I had believed I was married to a hero, not the kind you see in movies, but a real-world, everyday hero. My husband, Leo, was a paramedic. He was the man who ran toward emergencies when everyone else ran away. He was the steady hand in a crisis, the calm voice in the chaos. Our life was built on the foundation of this truth, on the pride I felt for him and the security his strength provided. That foundation, I would soon discover, was made of sand, and the tide was coming in. Our love story was simple, almost traditional. We met in our mid-20s, introduced by mutual friends. I was a fledgling graphic designer, full of creative energy and quiet ambition. He was already a paramedic, and he carried an air of confidence and purpose that I found irresistible. On our first date, he told me about his job, not in a bragging way, but with a humble reverence for the lives he touched. He spoke of the adrenaline, yes, but more so about the profound privilege of being the person someone trusts in their most vulnerable moment. I was captivated. Here was a man of substance, a man who made a tangible difference in the world. We married 2 years later. Our life together quickly fell into a rhythm dictated by his demanding schedule. Shift work, on-call nights, and sudden, frantic departures were our normal. I learned to be self-sufficient, to manage the household, and later our daughter, Lily, on my own for long stretches. I never resented it. On the contrary, I saw it as my contribution to his vital work. When he'd miss a dinner party because of a multi-car pileup on the interstate, I would explain his absence with a swell of pride. When he'd come home, bone-weary and emotionally drained after a 24-hour shift, I would be his safe harbor, the place where he could finally let his guard down. I remember one anniversary in particular, about 10 years into our marriage. I had made reservations at a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind we could only afford once a year. I'd bought a new dress. Lily, who was just a toddler then, was staying with my parents. Just as I was putting on my earrings, his phone buzzed with that specific, jarring tone he used for dispatch alerts. He looked at the screen, and his expression shifted from relaxed anticipation to intense focus. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his voice already distant. "There's been a fire at an apartment complex. Multiple casualties reported. I have to go." I didn't even hesitate. "Go," I said. "Of course. Be safe." I watched from the window as his car sped down the street, my own disappointment a fleeting shadow compared to the gravity of his work. I ate a sandwich over the sink for my anniversary dinner and felt nothing but admiration for my husband, the hero. Our daughter, Lily, grew up idolizing him. When she was little, she would strut around the house with a toy medical kit, rescuing her stuffed animals. For career day in 2nd grade, she insisted on dressing up as a paramedic, just like her daddy. Leo loved it, of course. He would sit her on his knee and tell her sanitized stories from the field, tales of helping people, of being brave, of making a difference. He was her superhero, and by extension, he was mine too. His profession wasn't just a job, it was the core of his identity and the central pillar of our family's narrative. We were the paramedics' family, strong, resilient, and proud. The trust I had in him was absolute, as solid and unquestionable as the ground beneath my feet. I managed our finances, but I never scrutinized his paycheck. He worked for the city, it was stable, reliable. I handled the investments, the savings, the college fund for Lily. He handled the emergencies, both at work and, I thought, in life. It was a partnership that worked, or so I believed. The first tremor, the first tiny crack in that solid ground, was so subtle I almost missed it. It happened on a Tuesday, about 6 months ago. Leo was supposed to be on a day shift, but he came home early in the afternoon, looking pale and agitated. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking up from my laptop at the kitchen table. I worked from home as a graphic designer, so my schedule was flexible. "Yeah, just a rough call," he said, avoiding my eyes. He tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door with a clatter that sounded unusually harsh. "Really rough. Boss told me to knock off early." This had happened before, but his demeanor was different this time. Usually, after a difficult call, he would be quiet but willing to let me comfort him. He would hold my hand or just sit in silence with me, drawing strength from my presence. This time, he was closed off, almost defensive. He went straight into our bedroom and shut the door. Later that evening, I tried to bring it up gently. "Do you want to talk about what happened today?" He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving in a quick, restless rhythm. "No, Clara, you wouldn't get it. It was just bad." His words stung. You wouldn't get it. In 15 years, he had never said that to me. I had always been his confidant, the one person who could understand the toll his job took, even if I couldn't understand the specifics. I chalked it up to stress. Burnout was a real and dangerous part of his job, and I knew it. I resolved to be more patient, more supportive. I suggested he take some time off. Maybe we could go on a small vacation, just the three of us. He dismissed the idea instantly. "Can't," he said, his eyes still glued to his phone. "We're short-staffed. They need me." I let it go, but a small, cold knot had formed in my stomach. It was a feeling I wasn't used to, a feeling of being shut out. I told myself it was nothing. He was stressed. He was tired. He was my husband, the hero. And for a little while longer, I managed to believe it. The incident on that Tuesday afternoon was not an isolated one. It was the beginning of a new pattern, a subtle but persistent shift in the man I thought I knew better than myself. The Leo who was my open, grounded partner was gradually being replaced by a stranger, a man who was restless, secretive, and perpetually distracted. His phone, once a simple tool for communication, became an extension of his hand, a private world that I was not invited into. He would angle the screen away from me when I walked into the room, and he started taking calls outside or in the garage, conversations that ended the moment I came near. When I asked who he was talking to, his answers were always vague. "Just a guy from work. Dispatch changing the schedule. It's nothing, just details about a new protocol." They were plausible explanations, and for a while I accepted them. To do otherwise felt like a betrayal. Trust was the currency of our marriage, and I had always been wealthy in it. To start questioning him now felt like admitting to a poverty of faith I couldn't bear. The emergency shifts also became more frequent, their timing more suspect. Birthdays, holidays, parent-teacher conferences. It seemed that every significant family event was now punctuated by a last-minute call from dispatch. He always seemed genuinely apologetic, his face a mask of frustration and regret. "I can't believe it," he'd say, running a hand through his hair. "A 10-car pileup. They're calling everyone in. I am so sorry, Clara." And I, the dutiful wife, would nod and reassure him. "We understand. Your job is important." I would then have to face Lily's disappointed face, explaining once again that Daddy's job was about saving lives, and sometimes that meant he had to miss out on our life. She was getting older, though, and the explanations were starting to wear thin. The pride in her eyes when she spoke of her father was slowly being replaced by a flicker of resignation. One Saturday, I was planning a barbecue. We had invited a few other families from the neighborhood. Leo was supposed to have the whole weekend off. He had promised Lily he would help her with the new volleyball net he'd bought her. But late Friday night, the phone buzzed. It was a text. He read it and sighed dramatically. "You're not going to believe this," he started, and my heart sank. "Kevin broke his leg playing softball. I have to cover his next 2 shifts, the whole weekend." "The whole weekend?" I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Can't they get someone else? You were supposed to be off." "Everyone else is already scheduled. It's my turn to step up," he said, his tone making it clear that the discussion was over. He packed a bag with a change of clothes and a toothbrush, a routine I had seen 100 times. But as he kissed me goodbye, something felt different. It felt rehearsed, hollow. The night before, I had been doing laundry and had folded one of his work uniforms. I'd noticed a small, greasy stain on the cuff that I had made a mental note to treat. As he walked out the door, I saw him pick up a duffel bag from the hall closet, not his usual work bag. And he was wearing a clean, crisp polo shirt, not his uniform. A strange thought lodged itself in my brain. Why would he need to pack a bag if he was just going to the station a few miles away? And why wasn't he in uniform? I walked over to his closet and looked inside. His work uniforms, the ones I had just laundered, were all there, hanging in a neat row. The greasy stain on the cuff of one of them stared back at me. A cold wave washed over me. It made no sense. For a fleeting second, my mind went to the most obvious, cliché explanation: an affair. Was he meeting another woman? Was this whole paramedic narrative an elaborate cover for a secret life? The thought was so ugly, so antithetical to the man I believed he was, that I physically recoiled from it. I felt sick with shame for even thinking it. I spent the next hour pacing the living room, my mind a battlefield of suspicion and self-reproach. I was being ridiculous. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe they kept spare uniforms at the station. Maybe he changed when he got there. Maybe the duffel bag was just for his food and other personal items for a long shift. I desperately clung to these rationalizations, forcing myself to build a wall against the rising tide of doubt. I was the wife of a hero. I was not a suspicious, paranoid woman who spied on her husband. The next day, a friend of ours, Mark, who was a firefighter in a neighboring district, called to see if we wanted to come over for an impromptu dinner. "Oh, I'd love to, Mark, but Leo got called in to cover a weekend shift," I explained. "Oh, that's rough," Mark said sympathetically. "Big incident." He said something about a 10-car pileup, and that someone named Kevin broke his leg, I said, the words feeling strange and flimsy as they left my mouth. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Kevin?" Mark asked. "Kevin from his station? That's awful. I just saw him last week, and I hadn't heard anything about a major pileup. Usually, news like that travels fast between our departments, especially if it's a big one." The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a block of ice. "Oh," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Well, maybe I got the details wrong. He was in such a rush." "Yeah, probably," Mark said, oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped on my world. "Well, the offer still stands if you and Lily want to come. Give Leo our best." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. Mark's words echoed in my ears. I hadn't heard anything about a major pileup. It could be nothing. Jurisdictions were different. Wires could get crossed. But combined with the uniform, the duffel bag, and Leo's increasingly secretive behavior, it felt like something. It felt like a lie. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me with her big, serious eyes. "Is Dad ever going to teach me how to play volleyball?" she asked, her voice small. "Of course, sweetie," I said, stroking her hair, "as soon as he gets a weekend off." She just nodded, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. It was a mirror of my own. I went to bed that night feeling a profound sense of loneliness. I was sleeping next to a ghost, a memory of the man I had married. The space beside me in our bed had never felt so vast and so cold. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together a puzzle whose picture I was terrified to see. The cracks were no longer small fissures. They were deep, jagged chasms, and I was afraid that if I looked too closely, I would fall right through. The event that finally shattered my carefully constructed wall of denial was not some grand, dramatic catastrophe. It was something small, personal, and, for that reason, all the more devastating. It was Lily's school play. For 2 months, Lily had talked of nothing else. She had been cast as the lead in her 4th-grade production, a quirky adaptation of a classic fairy tale. It was the biggest role she had ever had, and she had thrown herself into it with a passion that was both adorable and inspiring. Our evenings were filled with her running lines, her small face scrunched up in concentration. The script, full of her highlighted dialogue, lived on our kitchen counter. This play was everything to her. And it was everything to me, too. Seeing her light up on stage, full of confidence and joy, was a balm to my increasingly troubled soul. It was a pocket of pure, uncomplicated happiness in a life that was becoming confusing and painful. Leo knew how much it meant. I had made sure of it. "The play is on Friday the 17th at 6 p.m., I had told him a month in advance, pinning a flyer to the corkboard in our kitchen. "You have to be there, Leo. It's a huge deal for her." "I'll be there," he promised, looking me directly in the eyes. "I will move heaven and earth. I'll trade shifts with someone right now. Don't worry, Clara, I wouldn't miss it for the world. His sincerity felt real. For a moment, the loving, dependable husband I knew was back. He made a show of texting a colleague, and a few minutes later, he smiled. Done, he announced. Marcus is taking my shift. I am all yours that night. The relief that flooded through me was immense. It felt like a promise not just to Lily, but to me. A promise that our family was still his priority. The week of the play arrived, and the excitement in our house was palpable. Lily could barely sit still. On the morning of the 17th, she laid out her costume on her bed as if it were a sacred artifact. I took the afternoon off work to help her with her hair and makeup. As I was braiding a ribbon into her hair, she looked at my reflection in the mirror. "Is Daddy really coming?" she asked, a familiar sliver of anxiety in her voice. "He promised, sweetie," I said, my voice firmer than. My heart felt, and Daddy never breaks a promise. Even as I said it, a cold dread crept up my spine. He had been unusually quiet all day, his phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. We arrived at the school auditorium an hour early. I saved 3 seats in the 4th row, one for me, one for my mom, and one right in the middle for Leo. He was supposed to meet us there. The auditorium buzzed with the energy of excited parents and nervous children. 5:30 came and went, then 5:45. I checked my phone every 30 seconds. No calls, no texts. "Where is he?" my mom whispered, her brow furrowed with concern. "He's probably just stuck in traffic," I said, the excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. But I knew. Deep down, I already knew. At 5:58 p.m., just as the lights were beginning to dim, my phone vibrated. A text from Leo. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read it. "I am so sorry. A major gas line explosion downtown. It's all hands on deck. I'm devastated. Tell my little star to break a leg. I love you both." I read the text once, then twice. The words seemed to blur together into an incoherent jumble of lies. A gas line explosion. It was so dramatic, so cinematic, so perfectly engineered to be an unimpeachable excuse. It was also, I was suddenly certain, completely untrue. The lights went down, the curtain went up, and my daughter, my brave, wonderful daughter, walked onto the stage. She scanned the audience, her eyes searching for her father's face. I saw the exact moment she found me, and the moment after when her eyes darted to the empty seat beside me. I watched her hopeful smile falter, just for a second. Her shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. But then she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and delivered her first line. She was magnificent. She remembered every word, every piece of choreography. She shone, but I knew her, and I could see the tiny fracture in her performance, a hollowness in her smile that no one else would notice. She wasn't just acting on stage, she was acting for me, pretending she wasn't hurt. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. My simmering doubt, my anxious suspicions, my guilty rationalizations, they all boiled over into a tidal wave of cold, hard rage. This wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't about a strained marriage or a husband's midlife crisis. He had made a promise to our child, looked her in the eye and assured her of his presence, and then he had broken it with a casual, theatrical lie. He had let her down in the most careless way imaginable, and he had used his heroic profession as a shield. I sat through the rest of the play in a daze. I clapped until my hands were sore. I hugged Lily backstage, telling her how breathtakingly proud I was, my voice thick with unshed tears. She hugged me back tightly, burying her face in my side, and I knew she was hiding her own tears. The sight of her broken heart was the final push I needed. When we got home, I put a triumphant Lily to bed. Then I walked into the kitchen, picked up my laptop, and sat down at the table. The corkboard with the play's flyer was in my line of sight. Leo's promise echoed in my mind. I wouldn't miss it for the world. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a grim, chilling resolve. I wasn't a paranoid wife anymore. I was a mother protecting her child. I opened a web browser and typed local news into the search bar. I scrolled through every local station, every newspaper website. There was no mention of a gas line explosion. Nothing, not a single report. It was the confirmation I expected, but it still knocked the wind out of me. He had lied. He had bald-faced, unapologetically lied about something so easily verifiable. What else had he lied about? I stared at the empty search results on the screen, the cursor blinking rhythmically. The question that had been whispering at the edges of my consciousness for months was now screaming in my mind. Who was my husband? Who was Leo? I knew then that I couldn't live with the whispers and the shadows anymore. I couldn't protect Lily from his absence if I didn't understand the reason for it. I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I looked up the non-emergency number for the city paramedic service. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm me, I picked up my phone and dialed. It was time to call the hospital, or rather, the service he claimed to work for, and find out what was real and what was a lie. The phone felt unnaturally heavy in my hand. I stared at the number on my screen, the official administrative line for the city paramedic service. My finger hovered over the call button. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn back, to accept the comfortable lie and preserve the fragile peace of my home. If I made this call, there was no undoing it. If my fears were confirmed, the world I had so careful. Lie built would crumble. But then the image of Lily's face flashed in my mind, that flicker of pain when she saw the empty seat, and my resolve hardened. I pressed the button. The phone rang 3 times, each ring echoing the frantic beat of my heart. A calm, professional voice answered. "City Paramedic Administration, how can I help you?" I had to clear my throat before I could speak. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding strained and unfamiliar to my own ears. I'm trying to verify some employment information for my husband." "Okay," the woman said, her tone neutral. "I'll need his full name and employee ID if you have it." "His name is Leo Carter," I said. "I'm sorry, I don't know his employee ID." "That's all right, I can look him up by name. One moment, please." The silence that followed was the longest minute of my life. I could hear the soft clicking of a keyboard in the background. I closed my eyes, half praying for her to come back and say, "Yes, Mr. Carter is one of our best paramedics. He was indeed called into an emergency tonight." I braced myself for the wave of shame and relief that would follow. But that's not what she said. Her voice returned, still polite, but now with a hint of confusion. "Ma'am, I'm not finding anyone by that name in our current employee database." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What, that? That can't be right, Leo Carter. He's been a paramedic with you for over 15 years. "I can check our former employee records," she offered. "Can you spell the last name for me?" "Carter, I spelled out, my voice trembling. "Leo." More clicking, more agonizing silence. I held my breath. "Okay, I have a record for him here," she said finally. My heart leaped with a desperate, foolish hope. "It says a Leo Carter was employed with us, but his service ended." She paused. "It looks like his last day was 5 years and 3 months ago." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. 5 years. 5 years. It wasn't possible. He'd been going to work yesterday. He'd been wearing a uniform last week. He'd been telling me stories from the station last night. "Are you sure?" I whispered, my throat tight. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake on my end, ma'am," she said, her professional sympathy doing nothing to soften the impact. "The record shows his certification was revoked. It's a permanent file. I'm sorry, I can't give you any more details than that. It's a personnel matter." Certification revoked. The phrase hung in the air, sinister and absolute. He wasn't just unemployed, he had been disqualified. Stripped of the very identity that had defined him, that had defined us. I mumbled a thank you and ended the call, my hand falling limply into my lap. I sat at my kitchen table in the silent house, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. 5 years. For 5 years, my husband had been leaving our house every day, dressed for a job he didn't have. For 5 years, he had been telling me stories of lives saved, of emergencies met, of a reality that didn't exist. The sheer scale of the deception was incomprehensible. It was a black hole that threatened to swallow every memory, every shared moment of the last half-decade. My shock quickly morphed into a frantic, desperate need for more answers. If he wasn't a paramedic, then where had he been going? And where was the money coming from? I had managed our finances, but his paycheck was direct deposited. I had never questioned it. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop again and logged into our joint bank account. I scrolled back through the transaction history, my eyes scanning for his payroll deposits. There they were, regular as clockwork, twice a month. The deposits were labeled City Payroll Department. It looked legitimate, but now, knowing what I knew, it felt like a prop in a meticulously staged play. Where was that money truly coming from? My eyes fell on another account listed on the sidebar, our joint savings. We had built it up diligently over the years. It was our emergency fund, our dream vacation fund, our security. I clicked on it. The balance that appeared on the screen made me gasp. It was less than a tenth of what it should have been. I scrolled through the transaction history, my blood running cold. There were huge, recurring withdrawals, $10,000 here, $15,000 there. All of them were transfers to a personal account under Leo's name only, an account I never knew existed. The transfers dated back, I realized with a jolt of nausea, almost exactly 5 years. He had been systematically draining our life savings. The web of lies was bigger and more tangled than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about a lost job. This was a long con, a calculated and sustained campaign of deceit that struck at the very heart of our life together. He hadn't just lied about his work. He had stolen from our future, from Lily's future. I felt a new kind of anger. Now cold and sharp. The grief and confusion were still there, swirling in a chaotic storm inside me, but this anger was a clarifying force. It gave me a purpose. I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I was an investigator. I had to uncover the full extent of this deception, not just for my own sanity, but to protect myself and my daughter from whatever disaster he had been creating in the shadows. My investigation had just begun. The next few days passed in a surreal haze. On the surface, life continued as normal. I made Lily's breakfast, I responded to work emails, I walked the dog. But beneath this fragile veneer of normalcy, I was living in a different world, a world of spreadsheets, bank statements, and credit card bills. I had become a forensic accountant of my own life, sifting through the wreckage of my marriage, piece by painful piece. Leo came home the day after the play, his face a perfect picture of exhausted remorse. "I'm so sorry, Clara," he said, pulling me into a hug that made my skin crawl. "I heard Lily was incredible. I feel like the worst father in the world." I didn't pull away, I played my part. "She missed you," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "But she was amazing." The ease with which I lied back to him was terrifying. It felt like a poison seeping into my own character. While he was in the shower, I went into his closet and found the duffel bag he'd taken on his weekend shift. My hands trembled as I unzipped it. Inside, there were no medical supplies or work-related items. There was a change of clothes, a sleek tablet computer I'd never seen before, and a folder full of papers. My heart pounded as I pulled the folder out. It was filled with business plans, loan applications, and glossy brochures for high-end office equipment. There were documents for a series of LLCs, all registered in his name: Carter Innovative Solutions, Apex Strategic Group, Pinnacle Ventures. They all had one thing in common: they were all marked with the word dissolved in red ink. He had been trying and failing to be an entrepreneur. He had been playing the part of a high-flying businessman while pretending to be a humble public servant. The money he had siphoned from our savings, our daughter's college fund, our retirement, had been fuel for these failed ventures. The shame of his initial failure, losing his paramedic certification, had metastasized into a full-blown pathology of lies. He couldn't admit he had failed, so he just kept digging the hole deeper, throwing our money and our future into it. The most chilling discovery came from a credit card statement I found shoved in the glove compartment of his car. I had never seen the card before. It was in his name only. The statement was filled with charges I couldn't explain. Expensive dinners at restaurants he'd claimed he was too tired to go to with me, hotel rooms in our own city, and a recurring monthly charge for a storage unit across town. The storage unit, what could he possibly be hiding there? The next day, I told Leo I was meeting a friend for lunch. Instead, I drove to the address on the credit card bill. It was a large, impersonal self-storage facility. A cold dread settled over me as I parked the car. I walked to the main office, my mind racing. What would I say? How could I get access? A bored-looking man sat behind the counter. I approached, my heart in my throat. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "My husband, Leo Carter, has a unit here. I need to drop something off for him, but he forgot to give me the key and the unit number. He said you might be able to help." The man looked at me skeptically. "I'm not really supposed to do that. Privacy policy." I let my smile falter, letting a hint of desperation show. "Please," I said, my voice cracking slightly. It wasn't hard to fake. "We had a bit of a fight and I want to make things right. It's an anniversary gift. I'd hate for it to be ruined." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Look, I can't let you in, but I can tell you the unit number if the name on your ID matches the account. What was the name again?" "Clara Carter," I said, sliding my driver's license across the counter. He typed my name into his computer, and then he frowned. "Sorry," he said, pushing my ID back toward me. "The account is under Leo Carter, but the authorized access list. It only has one other name on it, a woman named Monica." Monica. The name hit me with the force of a physical impact. It was a simple, ordinary name, but it felt like the most hateful word I had ever heard. This wasn't just about failed businesses and financial ruin. My first, ugly suspicion, the one I had shamed myself for even having, was true. There was someone else. I must have turned pale because the man's expression softened slightly. "You okay, ma'am?" I just nodded, unable to speak. I turned and walked out of the office on unsteady legs, the single word echoing in my head. Monica, Monica, Monica. He hadn't just been lying about his job. He had been living a completely separate life. The hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The emergency shifts were not for a job he didn't have. They were for a woman I didn't know. The drive home was a blur. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, that I could hardly process it. He had not only failed as a professional and a financial partner, but as a husband. The entire edifice of our marriage was a lie. Every "I love you," every shared laugh, every moment of intimacy was now tainted, cast in the shadow of this monumental deception. When I got home, I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I walked straight to my computer and began methodically printing everything out. The bank statements showing the transfers, the credit card bill with its damning charges, the dissolved LLC documents. I found the website for the storage facility and printed the page showing their locations. I was assembling a case, a dossier of my husband's betrayal. Each piece of paper was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Putting on a brave face for Lily that evening was the hardest thing I had ever done. She was chattering away about her day, and I was smiling and nodding, but inside I was screaming. I was a ghost in my own home, my own life. While my daughter slept, I sat in the dark living room, the pile of evidence on the coffee table in front of me. It was a testament to 5 years of lies. I knew what I had to do. There would be no more pretending, no more quiet investigation. The time for confrontation had come. I was ready to face the stranger I had been living with for 15 years. I chose a Thursday night. It was a night he was supposed to be on a graveyard shift, but I knew now that meant nothing. I had spent the day preparing, not just emotionally, but logistically. I had contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had given me a checklist of things to do. I had opened a new bank account in my name only and transferred what little was left of my personal funds into it. I had made copies of all the documents. I was arming myself for the final battle. I told him I needed to talk to him about something important and asked him to be home. He arrived around 8 p.m., looking casual and relaxed in jeans and a polo shirt, the very picture of a man without a care in the world. The sight of his easy smile sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. "What's up? You sounded so serious on the phone." He walked over to kiss me, but I took a step back. His smile faltered. "Clara, what is it? Is Lily okay?" "Lily is fine," I said, my voice low and steady. "She's at my mother's. She's staying the night." A flicker of confusion, then wariness, crossed his face. "Okay, so what's going on?" I didn't answer. I just gestured to the coffee table where I had laid everything out in neat, damning piles. The bank statements, the credit card bills, the printouts of his failed businesses. His eyes followed my gesture, and I saw the color drain from his face. He knew, in that instant, that the game was over. What is all this?" he stammered, his voice suddenly weak. "This," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel, "is the last 5 years of our marriage, Leo. Or what you pretended was our marriage." I picked up the first document, a bank statement showing one of the first large transfers out of our savings. Let's start here. This was 5 years and 3 months ago. Coincidentally, the exact same time that the city paramedic service says your employment was terminated. Your certification was revoked, Leo. I called them. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The confident, capable man I knew had vanished, replaced by a cornered, frightened stranger. "You've been draining our savings," I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word of truth I spoke. "Funneling it into a secret account to fund these. What were they? Apex Strategic Group? Pinnacle Ventures? All of them dissolved. You burned through our daughter's future to play businessman, and you failed." He sank onto the arm of the sofa, his head in his hands. "Clara, I can explain." "Can you?" I shot back, my anger finally breaking through its icy shell. "Can you explain the lies, the constant, endless lies, the multi-car pileups, the gas line explosions? You let our daughter go on stage, searching the crowd for a father who was never, ever going to be there, all while you texted her some pathetic, dramatic lie. Do you have any idea what you did to her?" Tears were streaming down his face now, silent, desperate tears. "I was ashamed," he whispered. "I made a mistake on a call. I froze. They took my certification. I was a failure. I couldn't tell you. You saw me as a hero. I couldn't be a failure in your eyes." "A hero?" I laughed a bit. "R hollow sound. You think this is what a hero does? Lies to his family, steals from his child? You're not a hero, Leo. You're a coward." The word hit him like a slap. He flinched. "I was going to tell you," he pleaded. "I was going to make all the money back with the businesses, and then I was going to tell you everything." "Oh, I'm sure you were," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I picked up the final document, the credit card statement. I held it up. "So tell me, Leo, which one of your brilliant business strategies involved renting hotel rooms in our own city? Which one involved taking another woman to expensive dinners?" I paused, letting the silence hang heavy and toxic in the air. "Who is Monica, Leo?" He looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic. The last of his defenses crumbled. He finally broke. It wasn't a confession so much as a collapse, a torrent of pathetic excuses and self-pity. Monica was someone he had met at a business seminar. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. They were just words, meaningless and empty. I listened to it all without interruption. I listened to him try to justify the unjustifiable, to paint himself as a victim of circumstance. When he was finally finished, his voice raw from sobbing, the room fell silent. He looked at me, his eyes full of a desperate, pleading hope. He was waiting for me to comfort him, to absolve him, to somehow make this all go away. But the woman he was looking at, the woman he thought he knew, was gone. She had died the moment I heard the dispatcher say his name wasn't on the employee list. I looked at the man on my sofa, this stranger who had worn my husband's face for 5 years. I felt nothing. No pity, no love, no lingering warmth. The well of my affection for him had run completely dry, and the ground was now cracked and barren. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. She'll be in touch with you to serve the papers. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Tonight. Clara, no, he begged, scrambling to his feet. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. Don't throw away 15 years. You threw it away, Leo, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You threw it away 5 years ago. What we've had since then wasn't a marriage. It was a lie. And I am done living a lie. He reached for me, but I recoiled as if from a fire. The look on my face must have told him that it was truly over. He stopped, his hand frozen in the air between us. The fight went out of him, replaced by a look of utter desolation. Without another word, he turned, walked into the bedroom, and began to pack. An hour later, he was gone. The click of the front door shutting behind him was the loudest, most final sound I had ever heard. The silence that descended upon the house after Leo left was profound. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, suffocating one, thick with the ghosts of 15 years of shared history, all of it now rewritten and recontextualized by his betrayal. I walked through the rooms of the home we had built together, touching the furniture, looking at the photos on the wall, a gallery of a life that had been a carefully curated fiction. Every smiling picture of us was a lie. Every memory was a scene from a play, in which only I hadn't known my lines were part of a script. The first few weeks were a blur of logistics and raw emotion. I met with my lawyer, who guided me through the cold, procedural steps of dismantling a life. Filing for divorce, separating assets, negotiating custody, it all felt like an out-of-body experience. The hardest part, by far, was telling Lily. How do you tell a 10-year-old girl that her father, her hero, is not who she thinks he is? My lawyer and a child therapist both advised me to keep it simple, to protect her from the ugliest parts of the truth for as long as possible. I sat her down on her bed one afternoon, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. "Honey," I began, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You know that Daddy and I have been having some problems. We've decided that it would be best for us to not be married anymore." Her big eyes filled with tears instantly. "Is it because he misses my plays?" she asked, her voice a tiny, wounded whisper. Her question broke my heart into a million pieces. "Oh no, sweetie," I said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "No, this has nothing to do with you. This is about grown-up problems. Daddy and I both love you more than anything in the world, and that will never, ever change." I told her that her father had made some mistakes and that he needed some time to figure things out on his own. It was a heavily edited version of the truth, a flimsy shield to protect her innocence. I knew that one day she would be old enough to understand the full story, and that would be a new mountain to climb. But for now, my only job was to be her rock, her stability in the earthquake that shattered our world. Leo didn't fight the divorce. He seemed to have crumbled into himself, a man defeated by the weight of his own deceit. He moved into a small, rented apartment across town. I learned through the legal proceedings the full extent of the financial devastation. He had not only depleted our savings, but had also racked up a staggering amount of secret credit card debt. I was facing a mountain of financial recovery, on top of the emotional wreckage. There were days when I was paralyzed by anger. I was furious at him for his weakness, his cowardice, his selfishness. I was furious at myself for my blindness, for my unquestioning trust. How could I have been so naive? How could I have lived beside a man for 15 years and not seen the stranger lurking behind his eyes? I replayed conversations, searching for missed cues, for warnings I had ignored. The exercise was maddening, a form of self-torture that led nowhere. The truth was, he was a convincing liar, and I was a trusting wife. There was no other explanation. But slowly, very slowly, as the weeks turned into months, the anger began to recede, leaving behind a vast, quiet landscape of grief. I mourned the man I thought I had married. I mourned the future I thought we would have. I mourned the loss of the simple, unshakable certainty I used to have about my own life. Yet in the midst of that grief, something else began to grow, a tentative, fragile sense of peace. For the first time in 5 years, there were no more lies in my house. There was no more tension, no more walking on eggshells, no more feeling that something was deeply wrong without knowing what it was. The air in my home was clean again. It was just me and Lily, and our life, though smaller and harder, was honest. I started to find joy in small things again. The quiet rhythm of my workday, the sound of Lily's laughter as we cooked dinner together, the comfort of reading a book in a silent house. I had been the paramedic's wife for so long, my identity tied up in his. Now I was just Clara, and I was discovering that Clara was stronger than I had ever given her credit for. She was a survivor. She was a mother who would do anything to protect her child. She was a woman who could face a mountain of debt and the ruins of her life, and take the first, steady step toward rebuilding. My future is uncertain. I don't know what it holds or if I will ever be able to trust someone so completely again. The scars of Leo's betrayal run deep, and perhaps they will never fully fade. But as I look at my daughter, who is slowly finding her smile again, I know I made the right choice. We are free from the web of lies. Our foundation is no longer sand. I am building it now with the bricks of truth and resilience, one day at a time. It's a much slower, more difficult process, but I know, with a certainty that comes from the very core of my being, that this time it will be real. For those of you listening, you may be questioning the trust you have in your own life. Betrayal can come from anywhere, but discovering the truth, no matter how painful, is the first step toward healing. It's the moment you stop living someone else's lie and start living your own truth.